Look, as an enterprise leader, you are constantly promised true cloud sovereignty by major tech providers. But today, we're going to dive right into this explainer and expose the hidden legal, structural, and technical realities that are actually at play. We're breaking down a really complex, high-stakes web of international data laws, transatlantic agreements, and deeply embedded hardware vulnerabilities that directly impact the security of your organization's most sensitive data.
So, you might assume that because your data is sitting in a massive, secure, local data center somewhere in Paris or Frankfurt, it's totally shielded by local privacy laws, right? Like the GDPR? Well, actually, scratch that. We are going to completely dismantle that dangerous misconception right now, because physical geography is only half the story, and relying on it exclusively is an absolute critical blind spot for your enterprise.
And this brings us to a really deceptive industry practice known as sovereignty washing. You see this when global tech giants market a sovereign cloud offering based solely on where the servers are plugged into the wall. It's an incredibly brilliant marketing illusion, honestly. The servers are physically in Europe, sure, but the ultimate legal reality remains stateside. It gives risk management teams a totally false sense of security while leaving the whole organization fully exposed to foreign jurisdiction.
Okay, so here is our roadmap for unpacking this today. First, we'll look at jurisdictional traps and the Cloud Act. Then, the DPF and its structural instability. After that, we'll dive into hardware and supply chain risks, and finally, how to secure true cloud compliance.
All right, let's jump straight into part one, jurisdictional traps and the Cloud Act.
The core of this entire trap comes down to a fundamental mismatch. We are confusing data location with data jurisdiction. The crucial takeaway here is that physical data location offers absolutely zero guarantee against foreign laws if the corporate ownership is non-EU. Jurisdiction follows ownership, not geography, period. If an American company owns that shiny new data center in Europe, that company is fundamentally subject to American law. And this perfectly illustrates the massive extraterritorial reach of the U.S., CLA Act, and FISA. The Cloud Act explicitly gives U.S. authorities the power to compel U.S. headquartered providers to hand over data literally anywhere in the world. It entirely bypasses traditional international treaties like the structured MLAT process, which means your EU data center is essentially under U.S. jurisdiction. Add in FISA Section 702, which authorizes programmatic intelligence gathering on non-U.S. persons, and the fact that RISA extended these powers in 2024 through April 2026, well, you can see the problem. This isn't just a historical legal debate. It is an active, ongoing liability right now. If your provider is under U.S. jurisdiction, your data is within their reach.
Which leads us perfectly into our second major focus, the data privacy framework, and its underlying structural instability.
Look at this timeline. Historically, transatlantic privacy agreements have a literal 100% failure rate when it comes to bridging this jurisdictional gap. In 2015, Safe Harbor was invalidated in Schrems I. In 2020, its replacement, Privacy Shield, was struck down in Schrems II because U.S. surveillance practices just didn't align with EU protections. Now, in 2023, we got the Data Privacy Framework, or DPF. But with Reset extending FISA 702, that fundamental clash between EU privacy rights and U.S. national security is still very much alive and kicking.
In fact, legal scholars are already actively debating a potential Schrems III. They're questioning if the DPF actually fixes the foundational issues or if it just kicks the can down the road again. So as a business executive, you have to ask yourself, can you really base your entire enterprise risk strategy on a framework that history tells us is probably just a temporary band-aid?
And the structural instability becomes glaringly obvious when you compare the two systems. Under the EU's Article 47, citizens are guaranteed a right to an effective remedy before a truly independent traditional court. But the DPF redress mechanisms in the US, like the Data Protection Review Court, well, they aren't traditional courts at all. They're administrative bodies embedded right inside the executive branch. You're basically asking the executive branch to police the executive branch. To European regulators, that lacks the durable, long-term structural independence from US intelligence agencies that EU law fundamentally requires.
Okay. Let's move past the legal frameworks for a second and peel back the layers to the physical metal. Section 3. Hardware and Supply Chain Risks. The DG Digit framework assesses supply chain sovereignty using what's known as the SOV5 criteria. It strictly examines geographic origins and embedded code, because when you're evaluating cloud security, you can't just look at where the data sits. You have to look at the geographic source of the physical components, who actually controls the embedded firmware, and how dependent the system is on non-EU vendors. Now, weighting this SOV5 criteria at 20%,
heavily penalizes providers who use global hardware. And that highlights a massive, practically unavoidable industry challenge. Creating a strict no non-EU dependencies rule isn't just tough. In today's global supply chain, it's technically unfeasible. The reality is, Europe simply does not manufacture enough silicon, like those advanced data processing units, to run its own massive cloud infrastructures natively. We kind of just have to accept global hardware reliance while proactively managing the risks that come with it.
And that brings us to unassessed hardware risks, like the heavily debated Intel Converged Security and Management Engine, or CSME. Think of this management engine as a deeply embedded, proprietary backdoor that we can't fully audit. As security researcher Aurélien Francelon perfectly puts it, if there is a backdoor to access a room, it cannot be directly used if the room isn't a castle. You have to pass the castle walls first. Since you literally cannot rip that backdoor out of the hardware, your only option is to build an impenetrable digital castle around it, using strict network isolation, zero-trust architectures, and relentless active monitoring.
So, bringing it all together for Part 4, securing true cloud compliance. How do we actually do this?
Here is the ultimate takeaway for your enterprise today. Technical safeguards alone absolutely cannot transform a U.S. corporation into a genuinely sovereign European entity. Even if a provider offers you the most incredible military-grade encryption on the market, if they still manage those encryption keys, they can be legally compelled under the Cloud Act to hand them over. Technical independence does not automatically equate to legal independence.
So to actually secure your enterprise, you have to follow a few key steps. First, prioritize ownership and legal jurisdiction over mere physical data localization. If you absolutely must use global platforms, implement robust technical encryption, but you have to use a bring-your-own-key approach. Because if the US provider literally does not have the keys, they mathematically cannot comply with a Cloud Act subpoena for plain text data. They just can't. Finally, monitor your supply chains for global resilience, rather than striving for some unattainable total isolation. I want to leave you with one final thought to take back to your risk management teams. Are you paying for an incredibly well-marketed illusion of sovereignty, or do you possess actual legal and technical control? Go back, review your contracts, and ask the hard question: who actually holds the keys? Thanks for joining this explainer.